As a consequence of its deal with Poland, the United States is searching for methods to expedite the shipping of 250 M1A2 CPV-3 Abrams. These advanced main battle tanks valued at more than $5 billion in the area. The fundamental reason for this is that it is one of the most contentious issues on the agenda. The tanks were supposed to be delivered to Poland in 2025. However, the deployment of these tanks to Ukraine was seriously considered. The U.S. armaments industry can currently create 15 Abrams tanks each month, and if Poland transfers its T-72 tanks to Ukraine, it is obvious that its army would face a severe lack of tanks. 2 tanks and modified T-72 variants are also in service. However, in the contemporary Polish army, the bulk supplies to Ukraine emphasize Poland's urgent need for upgraded combat tanks. Another critical point to note is that Poland will take the lead in sending these tanks to Ukraine. Poland may willingly transfer the modern main battle tank Abrams to Ukraine, and there is presently no Russian tank that can compete with the M1A2 tank. This action is unquestionably crucial for Ukraine, and the M1A2 Abrams is a huge game changer. The fact that Denmark is delivering Harpoon and NSM anti-ship missiles to Ukraine explains the feasibility of this maneuver. Poland is about to receive M1A2 Abrams tanks to its arsenal, and it would not be strange to see these tanks in Ukraine. The crucial point here is that should these tanks come in to guard the Polish border. In reality, these tanks can serve a much more essential purpose, assisting Ukraine, although it is unclear whether Poland will accept to send these tanks further east. It appears likely that Poland, as a country that supports Ukraine's defense, will accept this offer. The fact that these tanks will fight alongside Ukrainian armed forces will provide significant benefits to Ukraine, given the conflicts in the Donbas. The stance of the United States is crucial in this situation. However, given previous pronouncements, if Poland sends these tanks to Ukraine, the U.S. will cover the resulting void in the Polish army. However, this speaks to a process that will take time, but the attitude of the United States will also be essential since Russia has already stated that U.S. equipment is a valid target in Ukraine, and a direct conflict between the United States and Russia is improbable. Could it spark a third world war? As a result, one of the United States' top goals is to prevent this catastrophe at all costs. The 250 Abrams tanks joining NATO soldiers in eastern Poland and dispatching Soviet tanks in Poland's hands to Ukraine will alter the course of the conflict from start to finish. When the attempted Russian invasion of Ukraine began, Poland was in the midst of a decade of modernization and development of its military forces. Poland was concerned about Russia's entry into Ukraine and was taking a harsh position towards NATO at the time, because Kiev was expected to fall in 3 days and Russian President Putin would not be satisfied with an invasion of Ukraine. Because of these worries, the Warsaw administration purchased from the United States F-16 fighter jets, Patriot air defense systems, and HIMARS rocket artillery. At the same time, the Polish armed forces secured a contract with the United States to acquire a 5th-generation stealth fighter in the future. Finally, during discussions between the United States and Poland, Poland agreed to acquire 250 M1A2 SEP-3 Abrams advanced main battle tanks from the United States. The M1A2 Abrams was a significant step in the evolution of the Polish armed forces. Once the Polish armed forces possessed these tanks, they would have the most potent ground combat weaponry in their arsenal, which was viewed as a significant milestone. Furthermore, the building of a security line in eastern Poland by the Abram will let the U.S. minimize its military involvement in this region. At this point, Poland had not formally supplied T-72 tanks to Ukraine. Poland, on the other hand, has hundreds of T-72 tanks that it may send to Ukraine. As a requirement, it would want to have Western equipment that can replace these tanks. At this moment, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson promised to deliver the most popular tanks in the British armory, the Challenger 2, to Poland. Poland supplies the T-72 to Ukraine, according to the agreement. Even if this offer appears to be extremely appealing, the supply of Abrams tanks to Poland, which will be acquired from the United States, stands out as a far more critical concern. After the US M1A2 Abrams tanks arrive in Poland, the country's dispatch of T-72s to Ukraine may clear the way for the U.S. to deliver further Abrams to Poland. At this time, it is vital to emphasize Poland's relevance to NATO and Ukraine. The U.S. and NATO nations have been providing guns, ammunition, and other military supplies to Ukraine. Since the first day of the invasion attempt on February 24th, Poland has established a transit channel for these transfers, as well as a lifeline for Ukraine to stop the Russian army's advances. So, how has all the military aid provided to Ukraine and its efficacy in combating Russia fared? What transpired? The United States has thus far supplied Ukraine with $4 billion in help. The great majority of this assistance is in the form of Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, Javelin anti-tank missiles, and unmanned aerial vehicles, all of which have proven successful in the region and inflicted significant casualties to the Russian army. Other NATO nations, led by the United States, began to contribute major funding for these aids. NATO nations are transferring billions of dollars to Ukraine. If we examine these assists more closely, the UK is the second country that helps Ukraine. The United Kingdom has deployed around 4,000 NLAW anti-tank missiles and hundreds of Starstreak anti-aircraft systems to Ukraine, the second most behind the United States. It also intends to send more weaponry, like armored combat vehicles and tracked heavy artillery. Furthermore, the Ukrainian army is now employing the French Caesar 155mm howitzer as another significant NATO partner. Germany also supplied Ukraine with thousands of rounds for mobile 155mm howitzers, and Milan anti-tank missiles. Germany has emerged as one of NATO's most prominent members. Despite the fact that Germany's position was unclear in the early days of the invasion, it eventually modified its long-standing arms transfer policy and provided thousands of anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine. It also permitted other NATO members to deliver weapons built in Germany to Ukraine. Many other NATO nations also provided military equipment to Ukraine to bolster the Zelensky administration. The time span of these shipments coincides with the procedure that began with the Russian army's retreat from Kiev. In the process, Ukraine achieved its first regional success, and the U.S. boosted the size of weaponry included in military aid packages to assist Ukraine in defeating Putin's Russia. The extent of Ukraine's help has been reduced in order to halt Russian army attacks on Donbass. Several NATO member states deployed main battle tanks T-72 tanks, as well as rocket launchers, artillery, and infantry fighting vehicles, were transferred from the Czech, and the Russian army's opposition to these supplies is crumbling. The Russian army of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kharkiv region has advanced over the Russian border in recent days. At the same time, they annihilated 3 tank battalions surrounding the Seine River with long-range strikes. All of this is a result of the armaments lately handed to Ukrainian armed forces by its Western friends.